Yeah, we are live. Just waiting on Jeremy. I know it just barely hit 4, but figured I'd just hang out for a bit. Um, I pretty much just sent him the invite link, so I actually forgot I forgot how good a Christmas Carol is. Yeah, a Christmas Carol is. Um, I watched it this morning. It's like a refresher, and yeah, I guess it's a classic for a reason. A lot of good stuff in it. I'm excited to hear what Jeremy has to say about it. I know he did a stream with Carson. I came in at the end of it, so I didn't really get to hear a lot of what Jeremy had to say. But yeah, it'll be fun. What's up, Phil? Dude, I think I've got a good feeling about this Christmas. Like the past few Christmases for me have been like I've been a Scrooge. I've been a bah humbug. But yeah, I feel like I don't know. I'm pretty hopeful for this Christmas. Uh, one cool thing is that so I was supposed to be in Los Angeles for Christmas, all alone, all by my lonesome, because my family's all here in Utah. But I got stuck here in Utah for various reasons, so I get to spend Christmas with my family, which will be fun. One thing about no video, it's just audio. No video, just audio. What? What? Well, what's going on here then? Dude, I see video on my end. Hmm. Bill, are you making things up, dog? Are you making things up, dog? Hmm. Hey, the man of the hour. What's up?
How's it going, buddy?
Good. Good to see you, my good friend.
Let me adjust my sound here a little bit. Oh,
Okay.
so you still got your mic there. You don't have your whole studio set up, but
Yep, still got the mic. I for a long time I didn't have my computer set up, but I figured I'd get it all plugged in and all that jazz. So yeah, how was your refresher watch? Did you learn anything new? Have any new takeaways or?
a little bit. I was particularly watching it through the lens of having just sent the link to you and thinking about you're watching it for the first time. So I was especially paying attention to how many corpses there are in this version, even
Yeah.
compared to other versions. There, of course, there's always a goose or sometimes a turkey playing a major role for the Cratchits. But in this version, first there's this scene with Christmas Present that really involves a whole lot of animal bodies at the market, and then um, also in the final act, there is a especially big point that Mrs. Cratchit makes about how wonderful it's going to be to cook and eat the goose, right?
Yeah.
So it is my favorite version of A Christmas Carol, but this particular time I was noticing how really emphasized that aspect seems to be. So
Yeah.
it's probably something that stood out for you.
I mean it not as I mean not as much as maybe it should have, but like I don't know, especially movies in that time I'm a little bit more understanding of like
Yeah,
um yeah.
it really does emphasize, it really is a striking example of what it is to live in dystopia, right? To have the awakening to the moral reality of what this interpretation of dominion over non-human animals means. Um, in particular with the Christmas Carol, the Ghost of Christmas Present plays this role as like a friendly and caring figure who is also like a agent of justice, right? Who turns judgmental um, toward people who aren't being kind or just, right? There are key scenes where he turns Scrooge's words back upon him, holding him accountable. He, of course, shows him the specters of ignorance and want as basically sickly, starving children, right? So he's this voice of a conscience, right? Which historically is also sending the message about poverty, about social class, about I guess collective responsibility, and so it's really striking, when you've had the vegan realization to see a character like that, who's this figure of righteous moral judgment, um, introduced in a fur coat with a giant turkey in front of him, or like,
True.
or no, in this version, it's a like a wild boar with tusks and an apple in its mouth, right? I don't know if you noticed. I believe that yeah, I've seen so many versions, but I always notice like what's around the Ghost of Christmas Present, and
Yes, something I noticed about the Ghost of Christmas Present is like how like militant he is, and like people watching it are probably like proud. They're like, yeah, it's awesome. Like he's saying what he should be saying, right? But
mhm.
then when vegans um are militant, it's a whole nother attitude.
Yeah, that's why there needs to be a real vegan Christmas Carol. I think it probably means I need to set to work on it. One that all the levels of vegan humor that could be put into it, but also keeping the serious message, um, the serious like self judgment and redemptive message. Um, yeah, expanding the circle further beyond the beings that Dickens wanted us to care about as part of our redemption to to the ones that weren't even on his radar. It is this Christmas Present. I consider it the best performance. One of the things that makes this my favorite version of A Christmas Carol is this Christmas Present and the kind of tone that he has. That's like it's like this passive aggressive, like cheeriness, like smiling while he's like,
Oh,
"Hello, how long did I lose you for?
uh, just like a couple of
Hello,
seconds. You still there?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm here. You hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so this this performance from Christmas Present is really good. With the way he's kind of this angry Santa Claus, right? He's got this like smile on his face while he's excoriating Scrooge
Yep.
for his trollish, cruel statements.
And just so we're like to be clear for like anyone watching, what's the name
Oh,
of this version that we just
oh
watched?
yes, we're talking about the version that was a made-for-TV movie in the '80s, I believe 1983, with George C. Scott as Scrooge. Let's see. Let's pull it up on IMDb. In 1984, it was a made-for-TV movie, but it had
Oh, we're losing you again.
many prominent actors from
Hmm. We've got a frozen Jeremy in here.
jeez, what's going on? Do I have too much stuff open? Let's close a bunch of stuff. Um, yeah, so it despite not being made for the big screen, um, had a lot of movie stars and theater stars. George C. Scott is American, of course, but a lot of the cast is English. You know,
Yeah.
there's another thing to mention about Christmas presents. You know, moral judgment and what Peter Singer called the expanding circle, not including non-human animals, and what it feels like to watch that. And it's something that a lot of people really don't get about the novel. Um, is that when Dickens was thinking about our responsibility to expand our concern to others, to the lower classes, to the poor and unemployed and starving, um, he was being nationalistic about it. His perspective seems to be caring about the English. And there's a couple of ways that I really know that. You know, I'm not like some scholar of Dickens' life or something like that, but in his book Bleak House, he has this character called Mrs. Jellyby, and she's a really one of his classic, like clearly negative characters. And her main characteristic is that she's involved in this charity work for Africa. She's always trying to raise funds for Africa and has an obsession with it. Um, and in the process is neglecting her family and her local community. And that, yeah, that's presented as a very negative characteristic, you know, to lose that particular focus upon your inner circle, and care about these people that we can't even see. But then the second thing is that in the novel of A Christmas Carol, near the end of the um, part 3 with the Ghost of Christmas Present, he kind of takes Scrooge on this whirlwind tour of people on Christmas Eve. He takes him to these two men that are alone at a faraway lighthouse. He takes him to sailors at sea. And he's showing like these people. He takes them to miners under the ground, and he's showing them that, you know, he's actually, the line he keeps saying to Scrooge is, "They know me." So he's saying like people have this spirit of commonality and kindness at Christmas time, even in these very dire objective kind of situations, right? So it's trying to evoke this kind of global empathy, showing Scrooge people that are much worse off than he is, but then he takes him to a faraway land, and you kind of get the sense for like a split second, oh, maybe Scrooge is gonna show that we should care about all the people in the world, but what he writes is, and at Christmas time, their thoughts were filled with memories of home and the wish to be home, or something like that. So basically, he takes you around the world to show you Englishmen who are overseas, presumably as part of the British Empire, right? And we should care about how sad these people are that they can't be home in England at Christmas time. He never he never indicates that the feeling that Scrooge should have is extended even to all human beings. So when you think about it
Yeah.
as a vegan and the role of non-human animals in the story, that's an interesting thing to realize, that he was being, in his mind, presumably like very very socially progressive, and taking a view of kind of Christian spirituality and self-redemption that involved caring about others, being generous, being kind, but it ultimately meant be kind about other English people.
Yeah, and that's I mean that is a common view a lot of people hold. And it's funny because it's kind of like there's kind of a battle going on, because it does make sense to have um it does make sense on some like level to care about those close to you a little bit more than those like far away, simply because you know more about them and you know more
Yeah.
about like what's going to bring them well-being, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if you start to forget about those outside of your circle. Yeah, for sure.
You're right. There is that knowledge, that knowledge argument, which is a good one. And I mean, it's kind of the same reason why a consequentialist would believe in freedom, right? The main fact at work there is that individuals almost always know what's best for themselves, with all the complex factors involved in different moments, than an outsider does, especially a bureaucrat that's very far removed from the individual experience of the individual. So
Mhm. Well,
we give people freedom not because we stand firm on it as an unshakable exceptionalist rule, but because we we humbly accept the incredible complexity of another human being, and know that we can never know more than a small fraction about their interests, right? And it's interesting because when we can, that's the thing that you got to say to a deontologist sort of argument is, the moment that we obviously can tell what somebody's best interest is in a situation, we become pretty comfortable with taking away their freedom.
yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I'll let you talk. Talk a little bit
no,
more.
no, it's okay. Yeah, yeah. No, I was like, that's kind of the point I was gonna bring up. It's like, well, it's like, yeah, freedom. I would say probably usually, um, is like brings about well-being, but not always. Like, I don't know if I am just like off the top of my head. Like, I don't know if we should give like people in like North Korea the freedom to vote or something. Like, we may, like, eventually, probably yes, but like we may want to like just give them like a nicer dictator, like just because
They're
been
not
so
ready.
like
Hmm.
they've been so like uh uninformed about things. It's like um giving them like the power, like the freedom to like have like a democracy and vote like may lead to like pretty negative outcomes. Um,
Hmm.
you may have to like transition. I mean, I don't know. It's just like off the top of my head. You may have to like transition slowly. Um, but I don't know. It's kind of a side topic.
Yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting comment. But um, what aspect of the story do you want to talk about? Is there anything that else that struck you about that 1984 version?
Um, I was one thing I was thinking about is like how it relates to like determinism. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of people. I was actually just. I said that. I said this with Carson at one point. Like Scrooge changed, and so a lot of people want to say, "Good thing we have free will, so he can change." But actually, first of all, we don't need free will. It doesn't look like his change was not determined. It looks like it was very expertly determined by very particular interventions, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, you see like when he's at his grave and he's like he's using this language where it's like he's like determined to do what
Hmm.
he like to do good. Like he can't like he has to change his ways. Like he won't like yeah, he feels like obligated and like
A
um
man's
because of
courses foreordain certain ends, or foreshadow. A man's courses foreshadow certain ends, but if those courses be departed from, surely the ends may change, right? Yeah. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
oh no, you're good. That's yeah, that's what I'm exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. And also like yeah, just as it goes from like the past to the present and then like to the future. Um yeah, especially in the future where like um and he's at his grave and it's like um or no, when he's like looking at like the dinner table like as it starts and then um I think like so like the Ghost of Christmas Future says something about how um if like you
Says
stay on this path then like this is what's going to happen. um yeah, or was it future or
the
but
ghost of
yeah.
Christmas yet to come says something.
Oh wait, no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. No, no, no.
The
This
death
was no.
figure
This
with
is
the
the present.
covered face and a
Yeah,
bony
yeah. No,
hand.
no, no. It wasn't him. What was the scene? There's a scene where I think it was Christmas present. And he says something about how like um um he says something about how like if you
About
don't
Tiny
change
Tim.
anything, if you don't change
If
anything,
about Tiny Tim, when Scrooge asks whether Tiny Tim will live,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
he says if these shadows remain unaltered, then none other of my kind will find him here. Which means Tiny Tim won't live another year, because the Ghost of Christmas Present, he makes it clear that there's a new one every Christmas, right? They
yeah,
only live for one day. They only come once a year, because he says like his large family he mentions, and then he tells Scrooge he has more than 1,800 brothers and sisters. So that's what he's implying right there, right?
yeah,
He's only the ghost of that particular Christmas. And so yeah, in that line he's conveying that Tiny Tim has less than a year to live if nothing changes. Yeah, but that language of, I think that's what the language he uses, right? Is if these shadows remain unaltered.
yeah,
So it's this metaphor of kind of people's current intentions or the current situation having a shadow, and the shadow is like I guess in technical terms, it would be like a default causation for some current situation to have a shadow on the future means it will cause that future unless some particular act of choice or effort changes that path. It's an interesting metaphor, a shadow, for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then especially at his grave when after he's shown all these how all these people are like explaining what kind of character he was, and he's like, "That's not me. That's not me." Um, and
Oh
then he
yeah,
gets to
in,
the
in this version is really interesting because in some versions you see it dawning on Scrooge that it's him very early, and then in some other versions he just like can't see the room very well, and he's just really kind of objectively clueless that it's him. But in this version, he recognizes the things as his things. He recognizes his door first when his body's lying there on the bed. But then he recognizes his things that have been stolen, that are being pawned off, right? And then later, after he's recognized them as his things, he starts to very clearly rationalize and say, well, no, somebody else could have had very similar things.
yeah,
They're similar, but they surely could have been someone else's.
yeah.
That's a cool aspect of this version too. Yeah, I like that choice. So what is that? What does that kind of say about his development?
Um, well, I mean, it really hits him like when he finally realizes it. Um, I don't know. It kind of goes back to the whole the big message of the story, which is like the message of redemption. That like even people like Scrooge who are so stubborn um can eventually change.
Yeah. So
Um,
okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
one thing, just like a side thing I was thinking about was when his partner comes in, um,
Hmm.
with all the chains and everything, and he's like denying. He's like, "You're not real.
Hmm.
It's some
Yeah.
bad beef." Um, and he's like, saying all these things about how he's just hallucinating, but then his actions very like clearly show that he believes in him in some sort. Like when he's like afraid and like runs behind his chair. Um,
Yeah.
it's like yeah, you're saying one thing, but you're showing another.
In this version, also, that's a good point. In this version, also, after he's had the experience with Marley, and then the entire experience with the Ghost of Christmas Past, he wakes up again and hears the clock striking 2, and he goes like, he says something like, "Oh, it's 2 o'clock. Where's this spirit that you you proclaim so glibly, Jacob Marley, or whatever?" It's like, you still you're still skeptical that a ghost will come at 2 after you after you've had this first ghost take you all through a vivid recollection of your past. That's kind of funny. Yeah, that's like the clear rationalization, or like a superficial like challenge of somebody who doesn't really believe his own doubt, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it also shows that just like how we'll try so hard to rationalize against things that we don't want to be true.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess what are some other things you found
So
interesting?
there's so many things to talk about, but especially want to bring up some particular consequentialist themes. You know, the way I see the frame of the story, and then some particular moments. First off, is the kind of expanding circle relationship between the past segment and then the present segment, where it really seems as if Scrooge initially is blocked off not only to others but to his own happiness and suffering, right? This metaphor of cold is really prominent in the book in all the versions, right? Scrooge is an especially cold person. Interestingly, in one of the 1935 versions, in the opening act, Scrooge says to Cratchit, as part of his telling Cratchit not to put any more coal on the fire, he says, "I'm not cold. Why should you be?" First, he says something like, I have many years on you, or something like that. I'm an older man than you. But then he says, "And I'm not cold, so why should you be?" It's such a great line in terms of what I'm about to say about the past and the present. Um, that Scrooge needs to be, he needs to have the ice broken through. He needs to be able to feel, I guess, empathy for himself. He needs to be able to really feel happiness and suffering in his own person before he can move on to the next stage, where he sees others and is able to empathize with them and expand his circle to them. So you could describe Scrooge initially as having a circle that's so contracted that it doesn't even include himself. At least not
Yeah,
himself as a expanded across time, right?
yeah, you definitely really see that circle expanding. Like in the beginning scenes, you see him like next to his in this cold dark room eating some I guess some like porridge or some like cheap soup or something.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Gruel, they usually call it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, and then by the end of the movie, he's you know this man full of charisma, s- ha- you know, s-
Mhm.
s- going and chatting up all the neighbors and having a big Christmas dinner um
Yeah.
and it kind of
It,
like you see him become happier, expanding his sadness to happiness, his coldness to warmth, and then you see that expand into the real world as well. Yeah.
it's really important to understand and for versions to depict that this doesn't just come out of nowhere, these capacities in Scrooge. You can see good you can see illustrations of that when he visits his past, but you can even see it in the opening act. Um, so there are many bad interpretations of A Christmas Carol that I've seen, and the initial like sign that it's going to be bad is when Scrooge is depicted either as somebody who just really relishes having a lot of money and spending it on himself and being richer than other people, um, which is kind of true of Scrooge McDuck in Mickey's Christmas Carol. Um, but even worse than that is when Scrooge is depicted as a sadist. So in some versions, especially some like animated versions, um, they'll show him like when the charity workers come in, like hitting them with his cane, or like slamming the door so it hits their back and they fall down outside of his office or whatever. Like that sort of stuff is portrayed, and it's It's really not true to the character at all. And the best way in our modern parlance to explain what Scrooge is at the beginning is a troll. What he's doing when he says to the charity workers, uh, "Oh, oh, the poor don't have a place to go. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" He's not he's not really being an active sadist who enjoys the idea of poor people being in a workhouse or a prison. What he's doing is he's acting like, he's acting like those are good solutions in this trollish manner to get a rise out of the charity workers. And the same thing when he says, the charity worker says some of them would rather die than go there, and Scrooge says, if they would rather die, then let them do so and decrease the surplus population. You know, Scrooge doesn't have the mentality of a genocidal mass murderer. He has the mentality of a troll who's just trying to come up with the things that he thinks will expose the amusing do-gooderness of these charity collectors, right? So it shows a sense of humor in the same way that a lot of what we call trolling posts on social media do today. But a kind of, and I mean, what a lot of people have suggested is going on with a lot of people who spend their time trolling, trolling people with a moral compass, trolling activists, that he's trying to protect himself from feeling that anything's seriously wrong with the world and that he has any serious obligations.
Scrooge is the guy that says "but bacon" though on a
That's
comments. Yeah.
That's exactly right, and that's what would be in the vegan version of the Christmas Carol. Is there'd be a couple of people coming in to collect for the sanctuary, the rescue sanctuary, and he'd just be saying, "Oh, there's no place for animals. Oh, I can think of some places for animals. There's like a big pig farm down the street, and there's a slaughterhouse across town." The charity workers would be saying, there's the sanctuary needs funds to expand because there's no more room, and he'd be saying, "I know a place where there's plenty of room for more pigs." Exactly what an anti-vegan troll post would say, right?
That's interesting. I didn't notice that while watching it. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, if you read the novel, his humor really comes out, and the best versions really indicate that he's got this sense of humor right from the beginning. And when he's talking with Marley too, and saying, "There's more gravy of the grave in you, old man," or something. Or when he's told that the spirits will visit him, and he says, "Well, why not have them come all at once so we can get it over with faster?" He's using these gifts fruitlessly, right? Just kind of because he's using them to keep up this emotional shield. Yeah, I wonder what else. Talking about consequentialism in A Christmas Carol, the kind of moral heart. The moral heart of the story is Tiny Tim, and there's this kind of Jesus and John the Baptist relationship. If you never noticed that before, that really comes out a lot when you've seen many versions of A Christmas Carol. Tiny Tim has a crutch, a single crutch, which is a T that leans up against their fireplace, and that after he dies is mounted in a prominent place to remember him by. So many people managed to miss that. I
I
think
missed it.
I missed it for a while, but yeah, Scrooge is a kind of a disciple or John the Baptist figure to Tiny Tim's Jesus, I think. Um, and but speaking about consequentialism, when Bob comes home with Tim and Tim's gone off with the other children in this version or whatever, Bob says to his wife that Tiny Tim they stopped by church on the way home, and Tiny Tim said to his father that he likes being in church. He likes having the people see him in church because seeing a cripple reminds them of he who reminds them on this day of he who made the lame walk and the blind man see. So that, of course it's a Christian story, and he, like I say, he's the Christ figure, but the consequentialism in Tiny Tim, where he's the crippled child, and instead of all his focus being on, I mean, he does want to get stronger day by day. He does mention that kind of personal optimism, but his focus is not entirely on how can I become healthy like the normal kids. And he doesn't spend a moment bemoaning his fate. His mindset is entirely, here's where I am right now. Here's the reality. What positive contributions can I make from it? What power to increase well-being do I have in the present situation? If I were a really strong man, I could go help people like fix their roofs. If I was like a genius inventor, I could go invent something that would improve people's lives. I'm a sickly, lame boy. What can I do? Well, I can go to places where people are more spiritually attuned, and I can be an inspiration for them to care about each other more.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the whole how can we increase well-being rather than woe is my suffering? It's like that's a very important message.
In the lines that the Cratchit family have in the future vision where Tim has died, usually Mrs. Cratchit says something like, when we think of Tiny Tim and how gentle he was, um, we'll find it difficult to quarrel amongst each other, something like that, right? The idea of, whatever your the situation of your life happens to be, being able to not only have a positive effect while you're here, but one that continues to ripple after you're gone is really important.
Yeah, it's super touching.
And the idea that Tiny Tim could have that sort of legacy from going on after him after such a short life, and Scrooge, people people make a mistake, modern people thinking he's supposed to be really old, and he's often depicted that way, really old by modern standards, but he's really supposed to be about 50. And but he's lived more than half of a very long life. And he's got at that point nothing like the positive ripples that Tiny Tim already has by the time of that vision, right? By the time of his premature death. Instead, he's got chains. And what are chains? What are Jacob Marley's chains that he tells Scrooge he's wearing invisible chains that are even longer? He says, the length and weight of your chain was just as great 7 Christmas Eves ago, and you've labored on it since. What do those chains represent? What do you think? What do you read out of it?
Yeah,
'Cause-
to me, it's like it's what what is past, like what is past has like determined by his um yeah, the sort of like the past is set, and you've like created this present for yourself, and if you continue down this like road, you're gonna have even more chains.
Mhm.
um
But the thing that builds chains in this story framework, it's not the way a lot of people today think about in our culture think about like sins or moral crimes. It's not like Jacob Marley was out like mugging people or was like a child abuser or anything,
yeah,
that we would like want think people should go to jail for. Um, what those chains are is he describes it, uh, all of the positive interactions he could have had with the world.
yeah,
He says every man is condemned after death to walk among the earth. Or every man must walk among his fellow men, and if he doesn't do so in life, he's condemned to after death to walk, to travel the world, basically trying to have the interactions that he could have had when he was alive, but no longer being able to.
yeah. And I mean, you see that with Scrooge. He's all alone in his dark, cold house. He has this money, but he's not really spending it on much. Um, he has no friends. He has a handful of people that are like, you know, um, trying to
Hmm.
reach a hand out, and then he kind
Hmm.
of just swats the hand away. Right? He's like, you can see
Yeah,
him creating his prison.
that's right. And this this relates to consequentialist ethics too, right? It's like it's not good enough to spend your life sitting at home and saying, I'm not hurting anybody. I do my job, I come home, I put it on the TV, and I'm not killing or assaulting or robbing anybody. I do a job, I pay for my life, and so I think I'm free, right? Um, whereas we're going to say, I think you're going to say with me that you're you're building chains of lost opportunity to positively impact the world when you're approaching life that way. And if there's any kind of if there's any kind of hell that you deserve, or I don't mean deserve in that really like punishment sort of way, but more like in a kind of karmic sort of way. Like what would be fitting if the universe had the capacity to sort of like give you a fitting like extension to the way you're living your life, then that person who thinks that they're morally clean because they don't commit any overt crimes, but who's not making any sort of positive difference or interacting with others with kindness and openness and generosity, um, the kind of afterlife that would be fitting for them would be roaming the earth desperately with a desperate desire to make a positive impact, knowing that you could have while you were alive and squandered those chances.
Yeah, there's a really cheesy like a lot of like self-help people and stuff will say things like uh you get what you give.
Mhm.
Um
And you
and
don't literally, right?
yeah,
It's not like
yeah.
literally a physical law of the universe that makes that happen.
Yeah, but the more I mean the more good you do,
Hmm.
like actively do, the more opportunity um I guess presents itself to you, or the more that you're aware of.
Hmm.
And
If
it's
you
just
take it
like
as a metaphor, you know, if you take it as a metaphor for just saying that it's morally good to expand your circle beyond yourself and even far beyond yourself, and ultimately, you feel you feel cleaner, you feel kind of lighter and simpler when
yeah.
you're
But even I guess a big thing for me would just be that the more you put yourself in situations to see like positive change, the more you can start like realizing within yourself um how things can change positively like within you as well, right? Like um the external world, um it's like in like a deterministic sense, like it's like little you're giving yourself little inputs that then start determining you to um make more moral actions as you continuously see more and more moral actions.
right. I think it's interesting that the I mean Scrooge is doing good in the world for himself by being opened up to happiness and kindness, but also this role of helping the poor in his community is clearly a very important part of the novel, but they're not really set in conflict. So it's interesting that Scrooge doesn't come out of his experience saying, I'm going to be an effective altruist, even with respect to the people of London or of England or whatever, even in that nationalist sort of way. He doesn't say like, I've got this much money. How many poor people can I feed with it? What's the best way to distribute it to them? What healthy food can I get to them most cost effectively? he doesn't seem to come out of it anything like an effective altruist. Is just I'm gonna go through my life being kind to everybody that I either already have a relationship with or that I happen to come across. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and yeah,
but it there
that's
is. Sorry.
portrayed as, yeah. Go ahead. The
I was just
relationship between kindness and positive consequences. What do you think about that?
relationship between kindness and positive consequences.
Or
Can you
whatever Scrooge is at the end of the story, whatever Scrooge is at the end of the story, just kind of being really open and generous to all of the people who are in your life now and people that you come across on the street, and um, the relationship of that to the kind of effective altruism idea of doing the
Yeah,
most good.
yeah. Well, the thing that kind of hit me was like, so you see Scrooge like kind of taking a step forward, right? He's someone who doesn't give anything, and now he starts giving something, even if it's not in the most effective way. He's
Mhm.
he's taking that step forward, and then it kind of relates to like how someone who does give to charity then like starts takes the step forward to like start giving to like an effective charity,
Mhm.
um, or someone who's giving to an effective charity then like giving to like an effective animal charity or something like that. So yeah, I guess the thing that hit me was just like his step forward, and usually with moral, at least from my perspective, like moral actions tend to happen in like small steps usually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I don't know if there's evidence to show, whether m- more people come into this sort of effective altruism mindset, not only this particular like social group or movement under that name, but whether people are more likely to come to that point through just more generalized charitable giving, and then redirecting that charity versus like the kind of person who would donate to the local symphony and the kind of person who would donate to the Against Malaria Foundation. Just being very different kinds of people from the outset,
Mm,
personality psychology wise. Hey,
yeah,
think about it
I
for just
guess
a
I would agree
second.
with that.
I'll be right back.
Okay,
I'm just
sounds
gonna
good.
get another drink, just like less than a minute.
All right, sounds good. I thought this comment was interesting. Even when people don't know what's best for themselves, the sensation of agency is valuable to them. So that's kind of interesting. Um, Going off of what we were talking about earlier. Um,
Okay. Um, well, yeah, especially with young children, that's pretty clear, right? A lot of good parenting and good teaching is actually taking away freedoms that are likely to be dangerous or harmful or counterproductive, while preserving the subjective sense of freedom, of self determination in the child. Again, I guess that's true of adults within societies too. Um, if that's what you mean, it does feel good when you think that all the paths are open to you, and you're able to choose the one that you go down. Is that, I guess that's what Phil's saying. Do
Yeah.
you,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's exactly what he's saying.
Jerome? Do you generally support the experience machine, right?
Yeah, very much so.
So if that feeling of freedom is good, then having a lot of fake fake feeling of freedom in an experience machine is still really good, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
I
it's not the to me it's not the freedom that's good, it's the feeling of freedom that's good.
Yeah, I'm open to the the argument that there might be something considerably less good about it from a pluralistic consequentialist standpoint. But what I'm what I don't really understand, but which a lot of people believe, is that fake freedom would actually be bad. Like the fact that it's fake makes
Hmm.
makes it somehow morally perverse and makes it dystopian. They think of these kind of experience machine stories as dystopias.
Well, people have an issue with like fake in general, right? Um, take really any topic. Um, and people for some reason have this intuition that the real thing is better. Like it's sort of like just an appeal to nature. Um, that which is like natural, that what is what's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody tries to defend it philosophically, which we counter as vegans with fake burgers and fake fake chicken strips and stuff. If somebody's actually trying to defend that as a philosophical argument, then yeah, it would be an appeal to nature fallacy. But psychologically, I think there's just a language thing going on with this negatively valenced word "fake," right, being used, and or this concept. It makes sense why fake things would tend to be viewed negatively, because often it's some kind of well-made product that somebody's trying to sell you a knockoff version of that's going to fall apart much faster,
Yeah.
or fake medicine that's not going to work, or you pay for the services of a fake carpenter. He messes up the job. um,
Yeah, fake is often viewed as something that is like less good.
yeah, for good reason, that 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 this general concept is viewed negatively, but then it's when you over apply the concept
Yeah. Like
that you have problems.
my favorite example is like The Matrix. Um where I think it's pretty obvious you should take the blue pill. Um like it would have been better to take the blue pill because it's like in the Matrix world, like you can fall in love, you can have experiences, and then like in the real world it barely exists, right?
In the real
Um
world.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's just like
it's
one
like a
example
it's
of
like
where
a war.
the fake thing is better. Or even like more the fake world is more real than the real world is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the question. Why are we accepting this label of fake versus real? What does real mean if it's not something like um, experientially robust? Like, yeah, if you you can make it even more extreme than the Matrix. You know, if your brain in a vat that's experiencing this majestic life of exploring a universe. What's the value in having all of that go away and just being able to see this tiny room with a vat and a mirror reflecting yourself, the brain, you know?
Exactly.
What even makes that what even makes that the real thing? Um, I'll go back to some Christmas Carol topics here.
Yeah, I had a small thing that I noticed was like the different ghosts represent how Scrooge is at that time. Like like the Christmas past seems a little bit like a lot more like innocent to like um uh and or like or and present seems a lot more I guess like irritable and then in in yet to come um or like future um he doesn't even talk and he's like kind of like in this version he's like depicted as like death kind of um because and Scrooge is dead. So I just thought that was interesting. Like it kind of
That's
represents.
good. Yeah, that's really good. When you're dead, you can't speak. But yeah, that's very cool. Um, so Christmas present is a present form of Scrooge, like Scrooge's conscience or something like that, right? Coming out, is that's what you're getting at?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty insightful.
Yeah, I just thought it was cool.
You know,
Thought it
this
was a good
aspect of
creative choice.
in this version, Christmas present, he has the magic torch, but he doesn't do the powder thing, right? In the story and in many film versions, he's like sprinkling this magic dust out of a pouch.
Oh, I don't think I'm familiar with that
I think he does it
with the
to
pouch.
doorways in a couple places, but then especially he does it over meals. And he says that he tells Scrooge it makes the meals much more delicious, like especially a humble meal, or I think that's the word that is usually used. And Scrooge says like a humble meal the most, and Scrooge says, why a humble meal the most? And the spirit says, because it needs it the most. That's kind of interesting, you know. Is it He's not like overtly changing the form of the meal, right? Not like he goes to a poor person eating like some stale bread and puts his magic powder and then, oh my god, now it's a feast, you know. It's still stale bread. So is that like just a metaphor for hunger? Is it a metaphor for Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of thing, or the diminishing marginal utility of things like food? Is that the deal? He's focusing. He's saying that the the most good exists to be done for the neediest people. Seems like something like that. Something more than
Yeah,
just he's literally a generous uh, force, and so he's just literally increasing the taste pleasure of food and choosing to do it for the poorest people. Like no, there's something metaphorical going on there. It's like saying this is where a little bit of charity does the most good.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Um, Yeah, I mean, it's like there's the whole conversation of like money money has value outside of the number on the bill, right? There's so much more um yeah, there's so much more to it than just, oh, this is $20. $20 given to an effective charity has so much more value than $20 given to Bill Gates or
Yeah. And just think
or a
about, I was gonna say, I don't know if we got frozen. I guess not. Um, the commercialism of Christmas in our society, and seeing like all the all the extra like warm socks and something and stuff that are gonna barely be worn, not needed. And then there's homeless people who really need some extra, especially warm clothes. It's I just wonder, aside from the tortured corpses of animals of the holiday, if you have the sorts of feelings from a consequentialist perspective about seeing the almost pointless consumerism.
oh, I can't stand it. I've become I've become pretty the past couple years I used to be a really big fan of Christmas. In the past couple years I've kind of become a little bit of like a little bit of a Scrooge. Like I am I
More that's more of a Grinch.
more of a Grinch, I guess. Yeah.
The Grinch's perspective is um, look at all these people being fake,
Yeah.
pretending that this is about love when it's really just about having a bunch of stuff and eating a bunch of food.
And usually non-vegan food too.
Mm.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this year, at least for me, I have a little bit more of a Christmas spirit, I think, but which is good. But yeah, the whole the sock thing, giving socks to like someone like a homeless person on the streets. Yeah, it's like you can buy your $5 pair of, you know, fuzzy socks or whatever, these nice warm socks, and to someone who's already in a warm home, it's like, oh, that's it feels nice, it's good. But for
Mm.
someone who
And it was just going to say, well, these tacky socks, okay, I'll wear them today, but then they're going in like the back of the closet.
yeah, yeah, but for someone who's, you know, in the cold on the street, it's like that $5 pair of socks is now a, you know, $500 pair of socks. Um, I- or
It gives more value to them than any item of clothing almost could give to somebody with a roof over their head and enough other clothes to wear. Um,
yeah,
what would it be? A warm pair of socks to somebody who's outside freezing on a city street. Do you think there's anybody who, if you gave them like a Versace suit or whatever Armani suit, that would actually give them more well-being? I don't know. Maybe there's people who love fashion a lot more than I do,
yeah,
but I kind of don't think so.
yeah, exactly. Um, I mean, it kind of plays out in like even like simpler areas as well. I don't know if simpler is the right word, but like just having your favorite pair of socks that you put on every baseball game or something. Like even that has like more value um
Mhm.
than like the price on the sticker on the tag.
Yeah. Looking at the things I posted to you in our Facebook chat um, to see things that we haven't brought up yet. But oh yeah, so talking about the expanding circle from the past to the present, and how Scrooge needs to have he's had this empathic openness to the various stages of his own life and to himself before he can be in a position to care about the others around him in his present. Um, then he goes to the future and is thinking about the kind of legacy that people leave, and he's thinking about determinism and choice and um, so in our real world consequentialism that leads to thinking about ethical futurism and this hotly debated topic about long-termism, caring about the potentially much larger number of sentient beings around in the far future. And the limited time we have to make decisions that might have disproportionate effects on the course that society heads in. It's a lot more of a stretch to try to read that into the story, but um, it's interesting to think about, especially because this has become a sort of the story itself has become a lasting moral touchstone. It sparked many moral conversations and spiritual conversations. So the story itself has had a future, like Scrooge is hoping to have a future of positive ripples that kind of extending out indefinitely. Um, I haven't really asked you directly how much you think about long termism or the beings of the far future, except to say that you're not an antinatalist like me.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
think
no.
suffering is automatically worse than happiness is good, or there's nothing you don't think the absurd idea. I consider it absurd that there's nothing bad about the absence of happiness. Um,
Yeah, I find it absurd too. I'm definitely pro happiness. I think happiness is good. What a
um,
wild idea. Happiness is good.
so how,
But
how much do you think about the of kind of the degree to which our actions might be having an effect on either how many happy people there are in 1,000 years, or whether they're more happy than suffering? Do you think about them a lot? Because if we colonize space, there could easily be like trillions of them, of trillions of humans, and maybe many more non-humans as well.
yeah, no, I'm very optimistic about it. I think my view is that like the world is determined to become more and more moral. Um better and better. Um so I just think like the more we head into the future, the better it'll be. Um
You're convinced by Steven Pinker.
yeah, I am. And it might just be like an ignorant optimism, right? Because like Steven Pink, like one thing, like Steven Pinker basically just like he takes a bunch of things that are like seem to be good on by most standards.
Mhm.
Um, but you could do the same thing that Steven Pinker does and just like point out all the bad things, right? Like that like factory farming is increased and
Mhm.
like um you know wild animal suffering and like all this really bad stuff. You can just do what Steven Pinker does and just point out all the suffering. So it's like um you can kind of go either way, but I may just have like an ignorant optimism about it. But I like what sort of think about it is like coming from a deterministic point of view where we're kind of like determined to make choices. What kind of fuels like the determinism is our desires for happiness. So we're kind of determined to take actions that we think will bring about well-being, and we're often wrong, but and the more we make those choices, the more we learn about what actually does bring about well-being.
Mhm.
So it's like this like program that's running where it's like um
This trial by error where you reduce
yeah,
the degree to which you get stuck in ruts.
exactly, yeah, and because it's determined, it's just like this program that's like getting these inputs and yeah, becoming more and more moral or
So, on the
happy.
question of progress, you know how in these self-report studies, self-reports of happiness or other kind of terms related to well-being don't seem to improve as objectively measured wealth and technological progress increases, right? At least beyond sort of beyond a low point, but like across like as society has gained all sorts of new um, products and experiences and capacities, um, people in their self-reports don't seem to be getting happier. um, I think a lot of people automatically take that at face value and say that people aren't getting happier. um, do you tend to think that the average person hasn't gotten happier with our technological increases, or do you think maybe they actually have gotten a lot happier, but they've just revised their language so that what it takes for them to use the word happy has just become a much higher bar, or something in between?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have the intuition that they actually are happier, but they've just revised their language. But again, that might just be like the potential like ignorant optimism.
Hmm.
What do you think? What is your intuition about that?
I'm mostly with you on that. Yeah, I'm definitely kind of put off by how many people seem to take these self-reports at face value and not understand that these terms are vague, and the application of terms like that can vary historically enormously. um, People just just look at um, it's like
Ye-
they want to tell this non-progress narrative. I think they may also be starting with the conclusion and deciding to use self-report rather than kind of objective list features of well-being, um, in order to justify their preferred conclusion that um, promises of capitalism are a lie or something like that. In some cases, or whatever their boogeyman is, if it's not capitalism.
Yeah, they kind of just they want to. I mean, and we might be doing the same thing, right? But as far as like trying to fit what the self-report shows about, like trying to fit that into our narrative. Um,
Sometimes it's I mean, clearly, like, the developed world is becoming less religious. So if you're religious, you want to be able to say, see, following this golden calf is not actually making you happier. The older,
yeah,
simpler, more devout times were actually times of greater happiness.
but the whole self-report thing is interesting. Like going back to the Christmas Carol with like Scrooge, like you see him like I think um you see Scrooge early on, and he's all sad and depressed, all alone in his cold house. He may have self-reported as like being fine, um, right?
I guess so, yeah.
At least I had that like intuition. Like he's like, I have all this money. Like um, I don't know. I feel like he may have like self-reported as being like fine when clearly he's much happier.
I think Bob Cratchit would have self-reported as being fine too, even when he's got a little boy that can't afford the medical treatment to keep him alive.
Yeah,
There's
I
this
feel like
line where they're praising Mrs. Cratchit's pudding, right? And there's this line in the book. It's like, sometimes it makes it into the versions as spoken by the Ghost of Christmas Present, but um, it's something like um, no one no one said that, no one remarked that it was a rather small pudding for such a large family. It would have been, what does he say, an embarrassment? Or no, and any Cratchit would have been embarrassed to have thought such a thing. Right. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, they
So they're not gonna self-report, our family so
yeah.
poor we can't even get a decent sized Christmas pudding.
Yeah, that's a good message. Well, I think there's kind of two messages there. There's one that's like one about being grateful and being thankful for what you have, right? Um, but I think a one maybe not as big message would just be that like um, we become we become used to what we don't have or what we do have. So it's like with the whole self-reporting thing, you can be extremely happy, and you may self-report as like um, just kind of being like in the middle or something, or like being kind of um, yeah, like not like extremely happy. But is that may just be because you're kind of forgetting about where you were before. You kind of get used to yeah, you get used to where you're at. But that doesn't mean like it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not more happy. It just means that you've
Mhm.
um become used to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
You know the A Christmas Carol is really a perfect story. Um, when Scrooge visits Fezziwig's Christmas party, yeah, he was apprenticed to, who treated his clerks really well, or they regarded him that way.
mhm.
And he has this great family, and he throws this great party, and Scrooge is really happy to have been taken back there, and then he remarks on like how wonderful Fezziwig's party was, and the ghost of Christmas present, being that sort of passive aggressive like voice of conscience for Scrooge. He says something like, "Oh, how could you say that? How could you say that he he was generous? How much could this party have cost? The food looks simple, and the the musicians don't seem very expensive or whatever. He has some like amateurish people performing, and and Scrooge has to realize like, oh, especially at this time in his life, and given the situation, it didn't actually cost very much money to produce this massive benefit and well-being for so many people.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole socks thing.
Mhm.
It also reminds me of have you read Rainn Wilson wrote a book called Soul Boom,
No, that's interesting
and
though.
yeah, it's actually a good read. But it's all about how like uh we need society needs like a spiritual boom. And what he means by like spirituality is exactly that. It's like the things that we value need to be um how this party was, and how people were treated, and like again, like yeah, the musicians were amateur, the food was mediocre, and but um the real value there was the love and the happiness that was like exhibited. Yeah.
Yeah, the tale that's told is in Scrooge's past is really interesting. That's a pivotal moment of Scrooge seeing like he actually had this mentor, this role model for how he could be right now. He says something also. He says in the book. Uh, this makes it into some versions. He like makes this like remark to himself, um, and the ghost like calls him out on, what did you just say? And he says, I was just thinking of my clerk. Yeah, I'm sure there's a line like that where Fezziwig's party makes Scrooge think about like how his relationship with Bob Cratchit could be. Um, what else, Jerome? A lot of stuff. Um, oh yeah, okay. So I wrote this to you in the chat. Um, the rational concept of responsibility and the emotion of guilt, and how we relate to our carnist past. Um, Scrooge goes through this night, and he has this building guilt. He has this climax of guilt and remorse. And then he wakes up and he's saved. And he doesn't seem to go around with remorse. He doesn't seem to go around with an emotion of guilt, even though he'd acknowledge responsibility. unconsciously, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the
But
things
he becomes a happy, kind of freed emotional figure. Um, what do you think about that? How much value does the emotion of guilt or remorse have when somebody makes the kind of transformative ethical change that you and I have made?
hmm. Well, I mean, it would obviously be like a more of an instrumental good, right? Rather than like an extrinsic
Yeah,
good. The
that's what
feeling of
that's what I'm asking.
yeah.
I'm not saying yeah, I'm not saying do you list yeah, feeling like shit as a as an intrinsically positive emotion. I'm asking how how practical, how instrumental do you think it is in our real world to continue to feel some level of emotional burden for our past grave moral errors
Hmm.
versus feeling liberated like final act Scrooge.
I'm not sure. I um I feel like I feel like the liberation feeling of like I'm gonna run out and do all this good is probably better for change than the feeling of guilt. But does that feeling of liberation um does is guilt what incentivizes that like feeling of liberation later on is kind of what I'm battling with right now in my
It's part
mind.
of it.
Yeah.
I mean, what and what's going to help you play a role in the transformation of other people?
Yeah, I guess guilt is kind of like like for other people. Guilt is like yeah, it's like acknowledging like oh a feeling of remorse that like you've done something wrong. Um and then after that comes like the desire to change it. Um and I'm wondering if yeah, I'm wondering if that desire to change it would happen without it. I think it might, but I'd have to think about that.
That's one of the this is one of the criticisms that are leveled against effective altruism, right? There are there's a recent trend of extremely annoying articles in the major print media about what's so horrible about effective altruism, usually from the political left, right? Who believe in sort of more conventional identity politics sort and governmental sorts of altruism. Um, one of the critiques is that it's emotionless. That there's like something you see something wrong with just calculating on a spreadsheet that you should
Hmm.
build pay to have wells built in Africa without actually going to Africa, without actually emotionally caring about the people who don't have clean water in Africa.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm definitely leaning more towards remorse, like the not actually being necessary. Because I'm thinking about it now and how like a lot of like psychopaths and like sociopaths will like give the correct answer on the trolley problem. Um, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, or even like,
Yeah,
yeah, the example of effective altruism is good too. It's like a lot of us who donate don't. I mean, we may like we understand that there's lots of suffering going on and we want to reduce it or increase well-being, but we don't like have this like physical like feeling. Like I'm not like in tears thinking about um kids in Africa or something. Not to the same level I would be, to like my next door neighbor or something,
Right.
who's suffering.
When you're dealing with remoteness, and especially when you're dealing with large numbers, um, a reason for that position is that the capacity for our emotions is is so limited in range. There's a line um, I saw attributed to Eliezer Yudkowsky, um, but I don't know where it originates, but it's something like our capacity for grief is incapable of feeling 1,000 times the grief of a single funeral, of a single person's funeral. So when we hear about a disaster that cost 10,000 lives, it can't feel 10 times as worse as hearing about a disaster that cost 1,000 lives. And he says, he says that the number 10,000 versus 1,000 doesn't multiply our remorse or our sadness by 10. It adds a single zero on paper for our eyes to gloss over. So if we're going by emotion, we can't consistently differentiate between things that are an order of magnitude or several orders of magnitude different from one another, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah,
if you
once
start if you start thinking about 9/11, you're going to feel really really bad, and if you start thinking about the Nazi Holocaust, you're going to feel really really bad, and you're basically going to feel really bad in the same kind of way. You're not going to be able to feel the difference between like 4,000 lives lost and 7 million lives lost, right? And
Yeah, that's a
so,
good point for sure. Yeah, well, like one is obviously worse, but there's the feeling of the emotion isn't aligned with that with the scale for sure.
and yet, like the emotions are maybe a tool to keep people in the world, keep us in the world, and or orient us toward caring about sentient beings. Yeah, I really like I really like what Dominion does. Dominion still, I think, the best vegan documentary, the best documentary for
It's a
for
yeah,
animal liberation.
it's
Um,
like it's a spiritual experience. It's like
but what it
yeah,
does at the beginning of each section for each basically type of commonly consumed animal product uh, is it gives a numerical list by country of how many animals are killed for that product every year, right?
yeah,
So it like keeps you grounded in, like, I'm watching like, this horrible stuff happen to a dozen pigs right here. I'm seeing this warehouse that has like 5,000 chickens in it. I'm seeing this horror on this scale, but then I've just been told kind of mentally how much I should be multiplying those emotions by.
yeah, yeah. And
Because you,
something Dominion does well is it the most of the narrative comes kind of in like the subtext, right? Like
Mhm.
it's really just showing you accurate things, right? It's like videos of like real farms, um, and It kind of
Yeah.
show don't tell. Yeah. So when it shows you those numbers, right, with each animal, um, it doesn't really like tell you what to think about it, but you kind of like determined to have like this response to it. It's like, wow, yeah, I should. Puts a number on that like
Although
emotion of like,
it does have an epigraph.
yeah, yes,
The
yeah,
poem it quotes in the beginning is from beasts we scorn as soulless in forest, field, and glen. A cry, a cry grows up to witness the soullessness of men.
yeah.
So
I guess there is some,
it does kind
but
of tell us that the point is, and that yeah. I knew I would tie this back to A Christmas Carol, Jerome. Um, when the Ghost of Christmas Present says, perhaps you should hold your tongue until you learn where the surplus population is and who it is. For perhaps in the counting houses of heaven, your soul amounts to less than millions like this poor man's child. Because that's what Dominion's saying too with that epigraph. Yeah, sure. We're going to acknowledge in an argument that in terms of their own personal experiences, their own capacity for different forms of well-being, a single human matters more by some ratio than a single chicken. Most of us vegans and most consequentialists are going to recognize that these kind of ratios exist, right?
mm-hmm.
But what that epigraph that is saying, and what the Ghost of Christmas Present is saying is, despite that, if you're living your life in such a way that you're regularly causing net harm in the world rather than net benefit, you, by virtue of the wide range of power, the wide range of potential effect that you hold as a healthy, intelligent human, if you are using it to cause much more harm than benefit, your life is vastly worth less than the average chicken. If your moral ledger has a little bit on the black side and a lot on the red side, no chicken could remotely compare to the badness of your life in the counting house of heaven. Which, I don't believe in heaven, which is a metaphor for consequentialist truth. So the question that people put to vegans rather glibly, surely you don't think that one chicken was worth the same as one human, right?
Yeah.
Well, as just strictly as moral patients, no, I don't. But the conversation doesn't stop there. They often want it to stop there. Because what the real fact of the matter is that the most good in the world that a single chicken can ever do, and the most harm that a single chicken can ever do, is within this narrow range. And for humans, it's this much broader range. And more humans are on the negative side of that range. More humans do have less value in the counting houses of heaven than any chicken. And I'm not even sure that I've exceeded that, right? I know I used to be like Scrooge used to be. Um, bearing all of the chains, having a huge negative value in the counting houses of heaven. And today I've shed one of the major sources of badness, and I'm trying to be a voice for getting other people to shed that major source of badness. But I still don't know that I'm doing enough. I don't even think there is such a thing as enough, but I still don't know whether I ought to think of myself as having positive value yet. So I certainly haven't been a vegan advocate for nearly long enough to outweigh my carnist past. But even just in terms of like what kind of effect I had within the last year, I don't know how much I can rest assured that it was net positive. I don't know. I'll just let you respond to that. I don't even have a question, but
well, I think it's kind of I mean, I have the intuition that you've probably been net positive, at least the past year. Not, I mean, you have you have like your carnist past, and I have my carnist past, so it's like I don't know on the whole if we've yet crossed that threshold, right? But I think at least within the past year, I've seen when you've donated to charity, and you've been vegan, and you've done some activism. I think you've been a net positive for sure. But that's also it's kind of the correct message to take from A Christmas Carol. I think a lot of people watch it and they have this view of like, oh, well, good thing I'm not Scrooge. But the truth is we're all Scrooge, right?
A lot of people, relate to a lot of stories that way.
We're all Scrooge, and we all need to wake up tomorrow morning or today and go out and start giving and trying to find ways to increase our well-being and make our lives net positive.
Even if A Christmas Carol were just about wealth, which it's not, it is partly, but even if it were just about that, you who are watching A Christmas Carol and think that you are Bob Cratchit and Scrooge is Elon Musk are wrong, Eric. If you're sitting in the developing world and you're thinking that you're the Bob Cratchit, by the standard of the expanded circle, by the standard of all human beings, you are not the Cratchit. You are the Scrooge.
Yeah, I think that's the correct interpretation.
Everybody who's watching that movie and talking about it and seeing what character they sympathize with is among the well-being elite of humanity.
Yeah, the very fact that you have the ability to watch it means that you have the ability to increase well-being by large numbers more than you are. Yeah.
And you should be you should be spending some of your mental effort learning where the surplus population is and who it is. Meaning, look into what real low level of well-being for a human is. And beyond humans, of course. Stop making bullshit excuses to torture and mutilate, terrorize innocent beings that are vastly worse off than yourselves. You're not the Cratchit. Even though Cratchit's got a big old formerly sentient being on his table at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to forestall some potential comments, like, we know that people didn't realize that you could even survive without any meat, right? The examples of people who couldn't afford any meat were probably eating like very what do I want to say, non-diverse diets, and they were getting sick. People who like ate nothing but potatoes and bread all day were probably getting sick from lack of certain nutrients. So there's scientific knowledge that needed to come along, and there's just enough wealth to eat a diverse plant-based diet. And so I'm not literally judging people in like early Victorian England for eating meat when they very well would have died young if they tried to completely eliminate it. I'm talking about the story as a story, and it's kind of spiritual metaphor and its relevance to our time, and it is tough to see this, especially the very moralistic, justice based kind of parts of the story with the Ghost of Christmas Present combined with the corpses of tortured animals. Yeah, those animals right now, whoever you are listening to, wasting your time listening to me, there's trillions of beings who have it a lot worse than you. So stop thinking of yourself as the Cratchit and thinking about how good it would be if comeuppance came to whoever you think of as the Scrooge.
Correct. Ding, ding, ding.
And there are people out there richer than me who are thinking themselves as the Cratchit. I promise you. I promise you that the people I'm talking to who are thinking this way are not all like objectively poorer than me. You like my sermon there, Jerome?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's
Jerome, what versions? Yeah, we're 2 hour mark, but I just want to ask you, like, lightening it up. What versions of A Christmas Carol you'd seen? What did you grow up with? Mickey's? Did you grow up with Muppets, or did you grow up with one of the classic ones? What's your reference point?
I had actually, this is actually probably the one I'm most familiar with. I grew up watching this one.
Oh.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen Mickey's, I've seen the Muppets. Um, but this is the one that like because typically when I would watch it, it would be like something that was like playing on TV. Um, that's where I watched most of my Christmas movies was like what plays on TV during the holidays, and this was like the version that would play most often, at
Have you
least on
seen
like.
the Have you seen the mini series from the 2010s?
Mm-mm. Is it good?
Um, AKA Wokemas Carol.
Woke Carol. All right.
No, it's not good. Parts of it are
Okay.
good, but it really bases everything around like Scrooge is a capitalist exploiter, and
Mm,
the worst thing is in the final act, uh, as part of his redemption, people still don't like him. They still don't really forgive him. And there's this interaction with Mrs. Cratchit where she's like still not forgiving him for anything. And it's like this woke perspective where if you've been in the privileged exploiter class, you have to constantly work on checking your privilege.
mm,
You can never be really be good. You can just kind of always be doing the work, as they say. That's the kind of impression that you get from from people's attitude towards Scrooge at the end of that
so
version.
not as much of a good Christmas feeling message
Oh, good
thing.
lord! It's it's so it's so opposite in tone. Like, it's like the worst religious. It, its tone, reminds me of like the forms of Christianity where we all just constantly think of ourselves as sinners every day, and the people that would like wear hair shirts and self-flagellate and stuff. That's kind of how it feels like you're supposed to be as a white male business owner when you when you come to see the kind of see the truth of your your privileged position. Not that you should personally feel like a relieved, happy, joyous, um, consequentialist desire to do good for others, but that you should feel prostrate or morally prostrate to your betters for the rest of your days. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's really long, so um, I don't know if I'm even recommend it. It is a mini series, but yeah, I do call it Woke Miss Carol, and it was made. It is a thing that exists in the world. Um,
Miss Carol, that's funny. Um, but yeah, I mean
also,
we've been going for 2 hours, so I think it's a good time to stop. But I
thanks,
think we
dude. That was
covered a lot of ground, and
interesting.
I had forgotten how meaningful Christmas Carol is. Um, it was really moving.
You should watch some other versions before Christmas comes during this holiday. A lot of
Yeah,
people think the Alistair Sim version, 1951, is the best version, and it's right up there. It's really great. And Patrick Stewart's version. Patrick Stewart is a good Scrooge, 1999. Pretty nice to see Jean-Luc Picard have a redemption. Anyway,
awesome,
man,
awesome. But
and I guess we'll talk in chat about when you're going to be heading out, right? It's not going to be too long.
well, yeah, well, I got pushed back for I got a lot of stuff going on right now in my life.
Oh,
But
beyond it's January still, roughly.
January. I'll be January 1st. I'll
Okay.
be in Santa Monica. So
I just got my FBI background check back, and don't worry, guys. They haven't found the bodies yet. I have I have no criminal record.
Nice.
So I'll be getting my stuff apostilled and heading back to Korea before too long.
Awesome. I'm
But
jealous. I've never been out of the States, so yeah,
well, once your music career kicks off, you can come play in
true.
Seoul, or
Yeah,
just whenever. It's not that expensive. You can find the flight is the majority of the cost. Um,
yeah, there's a difference between traveling and vacationing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. When you have people who will put you up and show you the places to go, and you're not spending like a tourist. You can afford to go some places for a little while,
Yeah.
especially if you have a somewhat flexible career or working situation. But yeah, we could talk about all this privately soon. But it's good to hear that you're making that change. Hopefully, LA will be good to you.
Yeah, I love
Enjoy all
LA. I
the
mean,
beaches that you
I
have
was
down
there for a little bit earlier in November. Um and yeah, I mean, I have great love and yeah, great love for LA for
What part
sure.
of LA are you going to? Because it's pretty
I'm
diverse.
I'm going to Santa Monica.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
yeah.
I don't even know if a Californian, even though I'm from Northern California, I don't even know if we'd refer to Santa Monica as LA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Californians would, but LA is just like what the
Yeah, exactly.
general. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
anyway, let me know. Let me know when you got a date or something like that, and I'll make plans to be down around Sacramento area,
Yeah, we
staying
can
with
meet
my
up. It'd
friend
be
there.
awesome. I'm
Cool.
down. But yeah, I guess closing remarks is that if you're watching the Christmas Carol, you're the Scrooge. Um
That's right.
and yeah,
And
find
God,
ways to
Jerome.
what's up?
Okay, sorry. No, you go first.
Oh, and find ways to just like Scrooge does in the end of the movie, find ways to increase well-being and increase happiness of those around you, but also expand your circle and
Yeah.
increase the well-being of those
Use the
not.
dark time of the year as a chance not to spend on a bunch of stuff that you and the people around you don't need, but to do the most good, to learn where the most good can be done, to fucking go vegan today, and think of the metaphor of rebirth during this time before spring comes again, and then of course from a couple of devout believers like Jerome and Jeremy. God bless us, everyone.
Awesome. And then on that, adios.
Adios.